And this is, they did it, entering the rodeo.
There you go. Well, thank you for being here. No, this is fine. Yes. How's it going? I wish I had a picture.
Brenton, different mic. Testing.
Have y'all all met Suzanne yet?
Check. Check.
The boss were new, Campbell was real, and he is the president. And I think the other two members are Malone and Strange. I think so. And the superintendent is retired. He's been here, right?
Yeah, he was the vice principal of the junior high.
Right.
And then the same year I went to high school, he became the principal of the high school. And a little while after I left, he was the.
What year did you graduate?
05.
Maureen?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. He was vice principal. He was my, the same.
Speaking about
Then he became deputy.
Jason
Jason,
Donaldson. I had heard that he wasn't trained, Lexi Jones,
Yeah.
Will Conley,
Maybe they're
John
up for
Brothers.
accident earlier.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I thought.
I did that on Friday.
Joe's father, who was a Navy commander, I believe, lived, Shady Grove, I believe, lived in Woodcreek.
Well, Malone lived here for years as well. He just moved 2 years ago.
Yeah, and,
He lived in Broken Meadows, I think.
they had an estate sale. They had an estate sale, and then after that, they donated everything to the village store.
It's working now?
Yeah.
It was. Right. No, it's just working. We're staying indoors. I'll go back to it.
All right. Everything's cranked up while we're building.
Said they were. In the open comments, there were 56 comments in support of parks and 11 non-supportive comments. There were 111 comments in support of trails and walking paths, 28 comments specific to support of playgrounds, 9 comments in support of a pool, and 8 in support of a dog park. Under question 14, when asked, people specifically supported a playscape for children. About 140 neither approved or disapproved. A little over 100 approved and around 80 strongly approved, and a little over 40 disapproved, and a little over 30 strongly disapproved. When it came to parks in general, about 130 neither approved or disapproved, almost 120 approved, and almost 100 strongly approved, almost 40 disapproved, and a little over 20 strongly disapproved. When it came to a community swimming pool, the support was clear, as the largest approval was about 95 strongly approved, with almost 90 approved, then stepping down from there to strongly disapproved at almost 70. A dog park seemed to mostly sit in the neither disapprove or approve, with strongly approved and the approved almost mirroring the strongly disapproved and disapproved. So here are my questions. Would it be helpful to send out a mini survey specific to park use and how the citizens would like their parks to function in the future? Have we done a disservice to the Parks Board by including walking trails as a part of the questions associated with parks? It makes sense that we would associate the two together, but given the open comments, many spoke to walking in the roads as that is what they do, because they don't have trails or walking paths or sidewalks. Would it be helpful when asking about trails to ask them in context of roads, or more specifically, have a survey that is specific to parks, separate from the discussion about trails? Other than the obvious question about how would you like the city to use their parks and providing them with where the current parks are, many comments reflected not knowing that the city had any parks, and including ideas such as playgrounds, picnic benches, water fountains, community spaces, gardens, etc., could include the simple idea of natural green spaces left untouched. And maybe then, based on the results of these questions, it could help the city focus on how parks are developed as if they are developed, or if they are developed. Citizens might simply want parks but left as unnatural open spaces, or they might want some developed for specific purposes that have not yet been considered. I would like to have an open comment section for citizens to present alternative ideas perhaps not yet considered. Farmers market, community garden, educational native flowers, and plant display. The other questions I think might be good to ask is to ask the different districts of the previous surveys that in place. Would they like the city to create a park or open green space in their area? And if so, somehow break down what it is that they would like to see in their neighborhood park. Some areas may be strongly in favor of a specific kind of park, while another may be less so. Also, the underlying question might be that if an area of the city doesn't currently have park space but wants some. Possible example of a question. In your area, are you within walking distance to a park? If you had a park within walking distance, what would you want this park to feature? There are common metrics that exist that suggest that having a park within 1/4 mile walking distance from where you live is a common goal for a city. Do our citizens support this goal? Also, another common metric that exists for cities is to have a certain per acre of parkland per resident set aside for future use. Is that something that citizens support? The main caveat I would like to offer based on reading the citizen open comments in the comp plan survey results is to try to separate the cost of these things from what citizens want. Often I read that the reason a citizen might not be supportive of developing parks was because of their concern over the taxes it might bring. And since the overall sentiment is about getting the roads fixed, it makes sense that they might see spending on parks as a possible drain on getting that goal met. If we can communicate that if taxes didn't have to be raised on residents, what would they support? The answers might give the city a better understanding of what to focus on regarding parks. And even if funding for parks was not a concern, there may still be people who simply don't see a value in having parks in our city. I think we should find out. There are ways to build and parkland dedication features for new developments, including in our ETJ, including fees that would specifically fund parks. Would citizens support such ways to fund parks? And of course, there are lots of other funds available, such as federal, state, and county park grants, etc. Perhaps the first question could simply be, if alternative funding were available for park development, what would you like? More parks, more open green spaces left untouched, etc. Again, asking about what kind of park and its use. Perhaps another question would be good to also gauge residents' willingness to help fund parks in addition to outside funding. Some may value our parks enough to be willing to raise their taxes a few dollars a year, some may not. Maybe the question could be about what amount they would be willing to contribute, or ask if they would prefer that it is purely donation-based or outside funding only. I personally support parks, as I grew up in a city that was very dedicated to having parks and easily accessible from wherever you lived, including tiny pocket parks, which were often showcases for citizen garden groups in the city. Often these were tiny little spaces where you could simply sit on a bench surrounded by flowers, spaces so small that nothing else could be built on them. We had a wide range of parks, large and small. The question was never should we go to the park, the question was which park. Parks are a well-established location for community building, a place where you can meet your neighbors and get to know them better. The residents of Woodcreek might be interested in creating more of these spaces if they felt that it wouldn't get in the way of getting our roads repaired. I know that the city is committed to getting that done first and foremost, but I also know that the city can do more than one thing at a time. It just needs to better understand what it is that citizens want and don't want. Chris Grummert.
Thank you very much, and I think it was worth reading. Chris is very thoughtful and a lot of things to consider.
May I comment on this? Make sure you have a microphone.
not that what I said is worth repeating, but back in the day when Mike Steiner was mayor of the city of Woodcreek, and we put in the bocce ball court on Augusta, I was charged with researching parks for the city of Woodcreek, and I did some extensive research and turned in all the papers to the city hall at the time. And one thing that I definitely recall is I had long conversations with this company in Houston, and they marketed park equipment. And the city council and committees had talked over different types of equipment to place. And so I told this company, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name, it's a long time ago, but they have equipment specifically designed for senior citizens, which at the time was the city of Woodcreek. It was not overly expensive, but it did cost a lot of money. And in order to support the budget, it was decided to trash can that study. And Steiner wanted bocce ball, so we have that bocce ball court. I'm asking, does the city have any record of the use of that still? And are the papers that I collected for the study still in existence here at City Hall? This was 2 years ago.
The use of the bocce ball court, are you asking?
That's one of the questions. Yeah.
I don't think we have anything that says how often the bocce ball court is used.
I remember because Mike Steiner was the mayor, and it was more of the bocce ball. He was looking at other options throughout the city, and there was a study, and it was submitted to the, officially. So very similar to that ordinances review, things like that. I don't know the retention periods on
Right.
we should look.
We'll have to ask Brandon.
Yeah, that's just.
Well, people used to have to come to City Hall and sign up to use the
Okay.
bocce ball court and to receive the balls to play the game.
Okay.
And then they had to come back and return the equipment.
I think the balls are just left out now, but,
They are.
so that's a good point. I made a note to look up the Steinhardt study. I think what Mr. Grummert, Councilmember Grummert is talking about here is the concept of a future study. And I think this document is very relevant specifically to our green space focus group. I mean, he did us a favor in analyzing some of these survey results for us and kind of diving deeper into them in regards to parks. I think the main follow-up question we have is kind of getting into the focus group orientation, is that, what more surveys do we need? How do we want to gather more information from the public? And, I don't know the date of, former Mayor Steinhardt's service offhand, but I do believe our population has likely changed significantly and since then. So I think that study on the land use is relevant, but I think moving forward, we should probably consider what our current population is wanting.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I noticed, and we'll talk when we get to work groups, but I do want to say at this point that we are sometimes restricted by laws that are necessary and well intended, such as the open meetings and open records. We have discussed, and we'll talk about it, who to add to these work groups. In addition to going out personally and recruiting people that we know are invested in the city and have the skills. I would like, having worked with Mr. Grummert when he was a citizen volunteer and a very generous one for his time, and he did assist us when we were the Roads Advisory Work Group with some master naturalists. We were looking at ways to, yes, fix our roads, fix our streets, but at the same time, some of the problems that we have, look for natural solutions that would preserve the beauty of Woodcreek and not be asphalt everywhere or concrete. So I know he has those skills and somehow, and I would like, and I think that as a citizen, he can participate and he would be an outstanding member. We'll be working with the city attorney on that to make sure in the area of natural resources, if he is willing to give his time. So I do thank, Mr. Glover. I'm not surprised by the quality of his submission, having worked with him.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
To Jerry's question about the bocce court. I live on Augusta Lane, so I pass by it there once or twice or 3 times a day, either by walking my dog or driving my car. I've honestly never seen anybody there. Which brings a question as to cost versus benefit. Graham is mentioning it here, right, that he wanted this separate the cost of an improvement from the actual idea. And, you know, if you put a wish list together with this is without having any funding sources for them, I don't know how realistic that is to work with. I mean, if you add up all these things people would like to have, you spend $5 million easily. And as far as I can tell, the budget is trying to break even as it is. So we would have to rely on grants and special funding. So I think I disagree with Graham as far as he was saying, maybe we should separate a survey question about what people wish to have and not include the cost involved. I think they need to be linked somehow. Are you willing to pay for having a park and walking paths? People say, no, I want it for free. Then we have to look at a different scenario where we only have to look for grants. If people say, yeah, we're willing to increase, to participate financially, different story altogether. And that would go through, I think, every subcommittee and advisory panel's work around here. That we need to think about how do we finance the things we are proposing or discussing? Thank you.
So, in regards to that question, the comprehensive plan's responsibility and duty is to identify the future goals of the citizens and to identify a plan to accomplish them. So we might not have the funds now. We might not be able to pay outright for these things, but we can recommend looking for grants and kind of facilitate that plan for development. I believe that he was talking about separating the cost of the roads specifically from parks and helping people to understand that our priority as a city is roads. I can say that with confidence. We're forming a platinum panel to address them. We've got a roads funding survey to be rolled out any day now. So I think a lot of people are like roads. And so the concept is, okay, yes, we've heard roads, we're moving that direction. Now you also want parks and walking trails. How do we address that? And get moving on that at the same time, because some of them might overlap. We might want to address walking trails while addressing roads. I just want to highlight a couple things in his comment before we move on. What you said, Commissioner Palm, is absolutely relevant. We cannot separate the cost of these improvements from the discussion, because the taxpayers need to understand the time frame we're working in. Not that we can't do it, but that if you want to put in a community pool and it's going to cost $1 million, there will be a time frame there to achieve that, and it might not happen in a year to 5, and it's a long-term goal that we would have to establish. But if you look at the second page, as far as when we're looking at our surveys or future surveys or any kind of focus groups, he made a comment about looking at the different districts that the previous survey set in place, and I just wanted to draw you all's attention to that because I think that's relevant. There are areas of Woodcreek, and I think by striving to gather data from each area or citizen input from each area, that could really help us sort of create a very comprehensive narrative of what the city wants and the dynamics of each area, because Cypress Points might have different goals than, let's say, the Overlook area, Palmer. So I think that that's a really interesting point he points out, of like, when we collect data, looking at those districts, he points it out in the respective park space, what areas of the city don't have parks, what areas might want a park. But I think there's other things that could fall under that. The second part I want to draw y'all's attention to is the discussion about the ETJ, right? So there are ways to build in park plan dedication features for our new developments, including in our ETJ. So I hope that's something, this is a more personal comment, that as we move forward and we're looking at the long-term plans for our ETJ, that we understand that we can require a percentage of park or conservation space be included in any future development. And I think from, from an environmentalist standpoint, that's very relevant, but also just for citizen mental health and the ability to, get outdoors and be an outdoor space. If we pre-plan for those things, we really set ourselves up for success, rather than building a whole neighborhood and then going, oh, we don't have parks, where can we cram a park in now? So that's something that I hope we look at moving forward, specifically with the ETJ, is how can we plan for these in the future versus retroactively try to create them. Those were my comments on this. Does anybody else have any comments directly on this before we move on?
I have one more comment, actually,
Okay.
of what is not included here, and I did send out an email to some. I don't know exactly who received it or not, but nowhere in this service, it talks about the quicksand golf course as being historically what was created, Woodcreek and whatnot. But nowhere in the survey is there really mention of the golf course, because people take it for granted. It exists today, so most people take it for granted that it will continue to exist forever and be part of Woodcreek. But that is by no way certain, in my opinion. Okay, as you know, the golf course is for sale. Those of you who are golfers will have noted that the maintenance of the golf course has deteriorated quite a bit. If you want deferred maintenance, if you want to, okay. So somebody's going to have to add more funds to the golf course to bring it back up to the level where it used to be. So people assume that it's an existing golf course forever, but again, as I said, it is for sale. You see who the new owner may be or may not be. My personal preference would be to find some way for the city to own it, okay, quite frankly, and be funded by grants and things like that. But I would like to make sure that in the next draft we have here, there is a mention that maintaining the golf course is of strategic value to Woodcreek. Okay.
May I
Go ahead.
add to that? Thank you for that. You ping in my brain, small as it may be, addressing golf course specifically. I'm born and raised from the city of Goose Creek, which is now known as Baytown, and within Baytown was a golf course and subdivision known as Country Club Oaks. Well, the Country Club golf course no longer exists. If you go out there to the place of the former golf course, it's full of streets and houses, very high-priced residences. So that is definitely an occurrence that could happen here, where we no longer have a golf course at all, but we have additional subdivision going in on the golf course property.
Yes, sure. So Commissioner Palm, Mr. Moore, you two are not a member of this work group yet, but we actually did, in the initial meetings, discuss the golf course. It was something I brought up as well. So those are astute points that you've made. The response we received at the time is, the golf course is a private landowner. So it would be like wanting to talk about my house and my property. And while I don't disagree that it's very relevant to our community, that the golf course is important to us, and that whatever we can do to help it and ensure that it thrives and goes on is important, there's a certain aspect of it that is basically, kind of, off limits isn't the right word, but it's just not sort of the purview of this study or this comprehensive plan. With that in mind, the concept of the city purchasing it or anything like that's a great discussion for another day. I'm not sure that that would be belong in the plan itself. And then, along those lines, I just wanted to mention that, yes, the golf course is up for sale. I don't have any relevant information on that right now. What I can say is that to convert a golf course into a subdivision is incredibly difficult in the state of Texas. So there is a little bit of like, just kind of ease that we need to have, or a breath we need to take on that concern, because it is not something that somebody could just do. So our citizens just, to ease that concern, that's not a threat breathing down our necks right now. I believe the city would definitely intervene and do whatever possible to preserve the golf course. We all enjoy it, and one way or another, I back up to it. It is in my backyard. But I just wanted to circle back that we cannot influence the maintenance of the golf course as a private entity, even though they're a massive public land holder. To my knowledge, this is coming from Mr. Lewis, a statement he provided in our initial meeting.
I'm sure that's correct.
If I may.
And my suggestion was not to be specific, just to make sure that it's included in the overall vision statement that the golf course continues to be of high value to its citizens.
Okay.
That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
Let me address that. I think that expressing commitment we have in previous meetings of this work group prior to the survey and through the survey, we have expressed commitment to support the golf course continuing in its present zoning classification, which is recreational, very similar to Camp Yonder there. We have 2 facilities within the city that are zoned recreational. And the city council member Hines is completely correct. It is still private land, but you as a commissioner in planning and zoning, and we, our successors in council, we determine the zoning for the city of Woodcreek. Any attempt or any desire to convert golf course to townhouses, which by the way, I was here when the FDIC had the golf course under conservatorship, and that was considered and discussed, and it did not happen because it is extremely difficult based on the maintenance of impervious cover, access to the residential space, a lot of stuff. So we will express our support. We cannot tell them, however, and we do have the experience in this area of having a golf course that is no longer there, and that is Woodcreek North. When we moved here, Woodcreek, there were 2 golf courses that golfers could play, and one of the reasons for the back gate at the time was that golfers could access the second course. It was in fact a better course. It could have been an LPGA event golf course, but the support, economic support was not there, plus there was a fire, there were a number of things that were going on. So we have been through that experience, and it is, you can still see the greens and some of the fairways that you go after Woodcreek. But we will express the support most definitely.
The biggest thing any citizen can do is go golf.
The other thing that they can do, and Jason is not here today, but the other thing that we can do is, we have a lot of people that grab their 2 or 3, particularly when they live on the golf course, they grab 2 or 3 clubs and go on the course and start hitting balls. Well, we as citizens need to encourage those who enjoy that to join the course, to become a member, to financially support the course. And that's something that we can do. I live on the Pacific Fairway, and it's sometimes a challenge, but most of the time it's fun, and I enjoy it.
All I want to do with this comprehensive report is maybe make an inclusion vision statement referring to the value that the golf course is giving all of us residents here.
I've made a note to work in maybe another statement about the golf course And, you know, along those lines, we sincerely appreciate our liquor store and the sales tax revenue it generates. And we love our Campground Judea for the, recreational space it gives, young people in the area, but also they're allowing us to use their space. So, when talking about our businesses, we need to be equitable and also understanding that, you know, we can't take a survey on whether or not I need to clean up my property. You know, it's just like we can't take a survey on whether or not we like the liquor store selection of whiskey. So, there's a line here we need to maintain for sure, as far as respecting the golf course's private property.
I agree, but
Yeah.
again, going back to different discussion about the Brook Meadows overlay, there we have no problem going in and making a change of private properties. I mean, that line may be a little grayish.
Yeah, we will preserve the zoning of the golf course, just like we preserve the rural residential aspect of Brook Meadow, for sure.
We will definitely will. If we move on to the consent agenda, if you have had the opportunity to review the minutes for the meeting from March 16, 2022, I would entertain a motion to approve.
There is a correction. So, Lydia Johns was not present at the meeting.
Okay,
She's moved out.
so the motion should reflect, if there's a motion to approve, it should reflect the correction that Commissioner Jones was not at the meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Bosse, second by Mr. Camp. Any discussion? Please go to the vote.
Co-Chair O'Brien,
Check, yes.
Co-Chair Hines,
Yes.
Member Camp,
Yes.
Member Moore,
Yes.
Member Posey,
Aye.
Member Palm.
Yes.
At this point, we're going to enter a regular agenda, and this is going to be very much true to the name of work group. It's a work proposal. Councilmember Hines we will work on, number 2 and number 3. It is a joint effort. This is our second, number 2 is our second review. We went through the, mission statement and other sections last meeting. This is the second review. And, during the second review, hopefully we can talk about work groups.
There's an item at the end about that.
Okay, then we have an item or we'll share number 6. We'll talk about focus work group orientation.
So on number 2, we are reviewing for the second time the vision statement, background, outline, intro, and overview. You saw a first draft of these, made some small edits. We'll entertain other edits today. And then everything in this survey will pass through a free review process. So by the third review, we should have a final version. And in that, you will likely see significant edits to make it more concise, clean up the writing. But it's really our job to fill out the content, if that makes sense. So when we're discussing this, I want to encourage you all to make suggestions on content. And, you know, typos, all of those writing corrections and things are also appreciated and encouraged, but I just want to really drive us to understand that this work group is responsible for the content of the entire plan. So the writing is sort of this backroom thing that we'll work on and have, you know, help with more professional editorial skills, but as far as what's in the plan itself, that really falls on us. And Brandon's going to be helping us and making suggestions along the way. He's only going to be attending every other meeting moving forward out of a way to conserve funds and really allow us, the citizens, the members of this work group, to write our plan and to get down to the nitty-gritty work of it. So if you look at the vision statement, that is a blend of Mr. Camp, Miss Lydia's, John's, and my own work. And it's also based on suggestions you all made in the first review. So it's rather lengthy. It will likely be cut down for the third review and made more concise, but it is a blend of essentially all input that was given. There is not a specific mention of the golf course there. However, there is a mention of the golf course later on in the document, and then taking note of Mr. Palm's suggestion, likely we'll bring it and the future vision, we'll bring it around then.
Yeah.
Do we have any comments on the vision statement or background portions?
Yeah.
No.
My only comment on the vision statement is, it is very good. It's very well done. I do concur that it should be maybe reduced, if we can make it, usually vision statements are more concise.
Okay.
And we do have a section in the plan that talks about the history of Woodcreek, where we can address specifically how it grew around the golf course. But I think the vision statement is very well done. Any comments to the vision statements and we move on? Okay.
And the background, any comments on the background about the comprehensive plan itself?
Yeah, I like the first sentence in this background. It's to me sets the tone for the rest of the plan. So if you have reviewed this, do you have any comments and changes, suggestions?
All right, so if you move into the outline, you'll notice significant changes here, unlikely that you have both documents side by side, but per Brandon's recommendations last time around, we changed the categories under current conditions and our vision for the future. I also reduced some of the subcategories. Typically in an outline, you don't go beyond like a second level of outlining. You know, you leave the third and fourth tier in the actual document. I also condensed the implementation. Originally had its own category, but if you notice in the writing about implementation, it did mention it's frequently included in the actual vision and future of Woodcreek portions under each category. So like natural systems might have its own implementation. So I bumped it up into that group to sort of consider individualizing it. So like we would have a fiscal implementation plan, a land use plan, a natural systems plan. And then I made that category E because I'm thinking that we might have an implementation plan for the plan itself, if that makes sense. Like how often we're going to review it, how we're going to review it and update it, and that type of behavior. What do y'all think about that?
Mm-hmm.
And then today we're going to briefly discuss the Woodcreek and the Wimberley Valley. Mary Person LeBrun has given us some talking points on that, so that is in the outline. And then our introduction and overview are the last aspects of the plan that are in the second review. I made edits where I had typos you all pointed out. So if there's anything else now, content-wise or editorial corrections, I would love to hear them.
One thing that I noticed is throughout the whole thing, there's a lot of lists that involve multiple words per item, and it might be a good idea to use semicolons instead of commas on those.
Okay. All right. Can you point me in an example? Just.
Like for example, in the background, there's a list.
Yeah.
The core philosophy, where is it? Promote a sense of community, preserve and protect the natural beauty and its wealth of resources, and to ensure the rural character.
Okay.
Like stuff like that.
Yeah, really, that's exactly. And I think that once we have a final draft, then we have to really nitpick it for grammar, punctuation. So that's a good, very good.
And another thing I noticed is that there's a whole bunch of numbers in here within the text, and typically if it's a number less than 10, it's common to write it out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I need it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to draw y'all's attention to the email Brandon sent. That was forwarded to everyone, correct? The one where he listed like 10 different documents for us to review? Was that forwarded to everyone?
No, I don't think I got it.
No,
Any document. This is articles.
Yeah, I got that.
So it was sent on March 2nd from Brandon. I believe forwarded from the city on the 3rd. It does list that it was forwarded to all comprehensive plan members. If you guys get a chance, I know it's a lot to ask. There's so much to read and review, and y'all are just volunteers. But before the 3rd round on anything, I would love for y'all to have read those documents and any of the other city plans I shared in the beginning to make sure we've really got all of the content that we want. You know, that we have hit upon any important aspects we think this comprehensive plan needs. I know that Brandon is working on reviewing our survey to identify any areas of the survey that are lacking. So there might be follow-up surveys that we need to do, and we'll be working on generating those together. But I just wanted to remind you all of that email.
Yeah, would it help if we were to resend the email, particularly for Commissioner Paul?
Yeah. Okay.
And then, you know, let's do that. Do you have it, Maureen?
No, I do not see it.
I'm resending it to you right now.
Okay. And then because Maureen has the best distribution list for mailing. And so we have an action item, Maureen will be resending that email, and please include the mayor when you send it.
I'm also going to reattach that initial document I made that gathered a bunch of comp plans for us, for y'all to review. I'm working on all of this myself, but you know, I'm one person, and the whole point of the work group is to have many eyes. So you're going to catch things that I might miss. And so if you guys can take the time to do that, it would really help make sure that we cover everything we need to cover. I believe this is it. All right, so unless you all have anything else to add on the intro or overview, we're going to move into the first review of the next.
Moving on to item.
Unless anyone has anything else on the
No.
intro and overview.
I think so.
Okay.
Move on.
So we're going to move into the demographics. So right now, everything we have in our plan that's written out is really just pulling information from other sources and putting them into this single document. We haven't really started to generate any new information for ourselves. So it's no surprise that this is pretty kind of, you know, just standard and accepted.
If I may for a minute,
Mhm.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to say things when I think of them.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for the next work groups to have these on the screens? Would that make it easier for you to review than the paper?
To have the paper on the screen? Yeah, we could do that.
So that, I mean, that's my idea, but I want to hear the input with the big one, who be there.
I'm fine with it, but I think that.
Okay, well, let's do it, let's plan on that, because it does make it, they make it easier.
I can edit live and
It helps.
get real fancy.
All right, and that, you can, okay.
So I have a factual question on under the demographics.
Yes, sir.
There are less than 100 lots available for new construction. Just driving around, it looks like there's a lot less than 100. I mean, where did that number come from?
There's more than 100, but it's right around 100.
Really?
There's about 110 or so is what I've heard in the meetings prior to now that are undeveloped lots in general. But when you look at how many of them are actually available for development, it's less than 100. These are words Mr. Lewis has shared, because many people, like our mayor Roscoe, sitting over here, own a lot. And they don't intend to develop it. It's between, you know, maybe two family members, or it's a second lot they own. In fact, I believe ENZ is looking at, y'all recently looked at people who want to fence in multiple lots. So there are handful of this 100+ that are likely not going to be developed anytime in the near future for a standalone single resident. They are second lots owned by someone else, or third and fourth even. But the actual like undeveloped lots that could be sold and built on with a single family residence right now is under 100. And that is just gathered directly from statements made by Mr. Lewis in the last year in city council meetings. I don't have a document for residents.
And even on my street, there's one, that there, I own 2 lots that 2 have joined. But, next door neighbor just bought the lot and he intends not to develop it. He intends to put trees in there and beautify the neighborhood. And we have quite a few like that in the city.
I just anticipate that those lots which are available for sale to be will probably be used in the next couple of years with pressure with the house market for the other stuff.
Yeah, and there was a lot of new construction even just last year, so I'm sure that number is likely to be down. I don't know that we have a current one, that's why we have that generalized statement, but we could definitely try to figure it out and update it and get a little bit more specific on that. 100 is, okay, that's basic. Okay. All right, any other questions or anything you noticed?
Something in the first sentence, it says Woodcreek has a normal bell curve, but then it says the population leans towards 65. So I guess it does sort of have a normal bell curve in that it's around there, but it kind of
It's certainly skewed.
yeah.
So,
what I'm saying.
this is where my background as a statistician pops in. So when I say normal bell curve, what I mean is that we have a small amount of population that's under a certain age. It ticks up in a gradual slope, has a peak, and then ticks back down. And there's a amount of population that's above, let's say, 85 or so. So that's what's meant by a normal bell curve. I can work on the wording there. And then any bell curve will have, it can shift where the peak falls. So like if you're looking at grades, for example, your averages typically fall around the 70s. And so, funny enough, so does our age population. So the peak of the bell curve shifts to 65 or so. 65 to 75 is where it peaks, but there's still that same sloping trend. We don't drop off, we don't start anywhere drastically, which some communities would. Like if we were specifically a retirement community, we would not have a normal bell curve population. We would actually, it would be very different.
Right. The 55 and over we're talking about, yeah. But I mean, it's clear that population is changing over the last couple of years of families with children and whatever is coming in here. So
That's what we believe. We do not have the 2020 census data. Exactly.
The 20, I have concerns with the 2020 census data as it applies to Woodcreek. I've gone online and researched some of it, and this very correlates pretty much with what we saw in the survey. But when it was taken, if you watch the last year, and particularly 2021, beginning of the spring, there were so many homes for sale. And I kind of drive the city to keep myself knowledgeable of what's going on. And what I have noticed in this area here, which is where I live, the houses that sold, I think all but one turned from a single couple, older couple, to a family with children, with 1 or 2 children. That's something I can walk down Champion Circle and I can point it to you. So I don't think that either the census or what we did, and that's why I think particularly parks and things like that, we need to look at many surveys. Those people were too busy moving and they were not around, or they did not participate in the survey. So I would like to see if we could update that information somehow.
Yeah, and as far as the survey results, only about half of our residents responded, and they were primarily from homes 65 and older, and of 2 or less people. So that leaves a huge portion of our population that didn't respond. But only technically constitutes about half, number-wise. So the responses were great. It was a great turnout, and getting half of your population represented on a survey is pretty cool. But yeah, we definitely have a gap as far as the other half is likely families, people with more, children living in their homes. They don't always have time to respond. Working adults.
I was accused one time that I was gonna get in trouble with the sheriff, but take the time to follow the school bus. That comes into Woodcreek and one. That's what I do it. The sheriff knows. And just count, I was at the stop sign in Champion and counted the number of children that got off the Champion. Just count.
Yeah.
And then it's really, it is an increase, a very significant increase.
Oh, and we were talking at one time about trying to figure out, maybe, because when we use just those enrolled in our schools as representation of how many kids we have, it's not accurate, because we have people attending St. Stephen's, we have people busing all the way to Dripping Springs because it's an open district, we have people homeschooling. So it's really hard to get a good grasp on the amount of children we actually have living here. The census typically gets a bigger response turnout than just city surveys in general for a lot of reasons. They have volunteers harassing people for one, calling you and knocking on your door. But anyway, so let's look at the demographics. We really want to look at content here. I'm definitely entertaining edits. I made a comment on the normal bell curve statement. So I will be working on all these things you all bring up. I'm taking notes and listening. So let's keep working on the demographics.
Is it possible to add a figure with that normal distribution inside the test?
Oh yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe Pegasus already made it, but it's based on the last census data. So it will be slightly inaccurate. I did add a comment that the 2020 census data, when it's released, we will need to update this portion of the plan whenever that comes out. Hopefully it'll come out while we're still working on it. If not, it'll have to be like an edit, a beautiful edit. So yeah, figure's a great idea.
I don't like to describe statistics as well as I do like to
And-
figures.
And again, use many surveys. Thank you. Okay. I think it's very well done. As I said, it's a work in progress, and I do encourage you to review carefully, and we do appreciate enough. It's a work group, so comments, participation are essential. And I do think it's shaping up to a very good work.
So, moving along, because we have not finished or begun working on B through F, that portion of the comp plan. So if we're looking at current conditions, letters B through F are something we're going to be working on with our focus group. So we're forming a focus group for environmental analysis. We've already begun forming the natural systems, physical, and land use focus groups. We'll talk more about that later today. So that's why those are left, because the information is not to put in yet. There is nothing there. So if you move on to the next component that was easily sort of plugged in is the citizen survey results from the 2021 survey and the overview and key areas of focus on that document. So this was just, most of this is taken directly from the K3 summary. I just sort of made it more plan friendly. It's a lot of that same data just plugged in here and elaborated on. I took some liberties, especially in the subsections A, B, and C, sort of filling them out a little bit more. So we should pay special attention to that because it's not directly from K3's.
Could I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Co-chairman, on the roadway improvements, we all know that that's the number one hot topic on any survey for the city of Wood Creek. Has there ever, and this is probably something for the roads committee to entertain themselves with, has there ever been a tax comparison on the concrete street down here before and after valuation?
You mean property taxes?
Yeah. That would be interesting, perhaps to sell the idea of more concrete streets that could fill it.
Well, they're very expensive. We do have the numbers on, and that was discussed by the previous council. The concrete, I don't know the exact price off the top of my head, but I want to say it's double the cost of the redoing the asphalt. And then I did not live in Woodcreek during the period of time that the concrete Brook Hollow Street was implemented. So I can't speak on the information given to citizens during that time. But my understanding is that there was a pretty significant increase in taxes immediately. And then now, if we were to compare the numbers we have now, they are reduced because we are about 4 years, I believe, into paying off that debt and still have 3 remaining. I could be slightly off on that. So whatever we're paying now is reduced from what we were initially paying. But if you're looking at double the cost, it's double the tax increase.
I was on council when the decision was made. I do understand that the decision to go concrete at the time was supported by a full ribbon panel. And one of the reasons was the reconstruction of the bridge. They have to be, and the culverts, that would have to be done in concrete. This is one of the reasons given was to then do the entire street in concrete. Even though there has not been a study per se, some of the comments, what they call the narrative comments within the survey when it came to roads, the citizens that responded spoke against concrete. They said it was noisy and it had increased the opportunity for speeding, and they would refer as that was the only, that's the input that we had in the survey.
And follow up, Jerry, excuse me, Mr. Moore, but I know that portions of whatever improvements we do will have to be concrete. And so there is not this, we pick one option and that's it when it comes to fixing our roads. So like the cul-de-sacs and things like that will have to be, will likely have to be concrete. So that work is specifically under the platinum panel. It will be their job to sort of help us nail down those costs, nail down those final plans so that the citizens can make an educated decision. The council has all the information they need to decide as well. Anything else about citizen survey results 2021 overview and key areas of focus? We've got our most pressing issues. Those items were outlined by K3 by Brandon, and I just filled in the writing around them. This just gave us bulletin points. Same with future developmental goals and addressing mobility. If there's no further comments, I'm just giving people time to.
Okay, so if there are and we've seen the comments, I think that what the next steps on this, this is our first review, so the next steps will be with some of the comments that have been made, some of the suggestions that have been made, is that next meeting we'll have a second review. And so that for this point, I do not believe that we need a motion to move on to the next item of the agenda. This is just working. So,
The question was, which group will be looking at the contract the city has with architects? I would think that will show some limitations in the future for us. Is that not part of comprehensive plan?
The contract with Aquatex is kind of falls with the city council in particular. That's not something any of us would have the authority to negotiate. But as far as talking about, that system, right, our sewage and our water, that falls under the physical system. So it would be addressed under current conditions and under the future vision of what we would like to see, happen.
All utilities, and we'll talk about the progress that we have made getting members in the work group and how to construct them. Item six of the agenda. Okay, this is a very rough draft. When we did research on comprehensive plans from other cities our size and cities larger in Texas, we did review the comprehensive plan of the city of Woodbury. It's more of a vision plan if you look at it. They're not as extensive as ours will be on future and future land use. But one of the things that they have is at the end of their plan, they have a section that recognizes the fact that we share a home with them and with Chase County and Wimberley Valley. And it also, in our survey, many of the citizens, when they were presented with options for commercial development or entertainment or coffee shops, or their response in the survey was, those things, we can get those things in Wimberley. We just keep our place, let's keep ourselves how we are. So this is a very broad first draft, bullets that I put together, and or comment, but we do want to have a section that speaks to our relationship with both the city of Woodbury and the unincorporated areas in the county, and how we share the same challenges of growth, and we should share the same commitments to protection. So any comments and suggestions, please be free.
Brain on Woodcreek car. Is there anybody we could put pressure on them to change their name because other than Woodcreek? Oh, well, no, that's Woodcreek North. Well, that's part of it. No, that's
Well said.
yeah.
I don't think so. There's a large portion of that area that is Wimberley Valley Springs. They have that section, and that section is growing. But I don't know, we have, not this, I'm trying to remember when Councilmember Cindy Jackson was on council. We talked with the property owners there, and we also had some meetings with them, and we had also the people, the property owners with the property in the lodge approaches, because they have some challenges that are not being met. And, but there is a reluctance, of course, to annexation. There's a reluctance because immediately they have to tax the city, and there will be an expectation of services that probably get not delivered physically, and some of the conditions in those areas are require a lot of investment. But they will not change. The thing that we have to emphasize is whenever is that we are the city of Woodcreek. I mean, even Apple, Texas, that calls us Woodcreek Phase 1. Absolutely detest. But I mean, we have had those meetings. We had those meetings with them. They were very good in sharing information, but no willingness to make any changes at this time.
Does our ETJ cover water and Woodcreek?
You can see more fraction. ITJ, like I know that some parts of the here's an app for ETJ, and you can tell the little missing line. So some parts of it is
Like right here.
Yeah.
It's not very much.
This is more like Eagle Rock. Right. So some parts of Eagle Rock, yeah, definitely are ETJ. And it's interesting because every now and then I get an email from someone who lives in that area, when are you gonna fix our roads?
Well, and Eagle Rock is actually Woodcreek North. So, our ETJ covers more of Eagle Rock, but just barely a fraction.
That's what I'm saying. Also, your wrong is somebody, the Woodcreek, very little. It's the way that it's.
And there are three different systems that are operating,
Oh, okay.
three different pumps.
Yeah, I'm going with the wrong has very little.
Right, sorry.
So it's, and
So, what is the direction we want to take with this? Because essentially, the questions we have now, obviously, we could write a little feel-good blurb there, but what we need to think about is what are Woodcreek's goals as part of the Cumberland Valley? What do we want to see for ourselves? How do we want to move forward with our commitments on certain topics, like protecting impervious coverage and making sure it's low, to ensure our water is healthy to drink and our streams are clean, and that we have a high water table, things like that. That would be an aspect I would like to see in this area. Commitments to the library that we use, the fire protection services we rely upon, law enforcement, things like that are all touched upon in this document. And so we just need to be thinking about that and consider how are we going to get more citizen input on that? What do we want that to look like? What is important to it?
and shares. But this is just the beginning, so if you only have this for 2 days, and you don't have any comments here, please, for the next meeting, submit ideas, comments, of what would you like to see in this section? What would you like to see your interaction with our partners for that?
So Aurora, with Wimberley, they have a children's play area or the children's play area. Do you know what Wimberley plans to do going forward? I think it's improvements to the parks, whatever. Is what they're going to do. Things to be together. Do you know what the plans are?
Well, what requires that is a private practice technically only for the residents of Woodcreek Farm. So we have to be a little bit careful just because it's in the valley and there's not a guard saying no. We have to be careful about assuming those are for us, because we are our own city, and there is a kind of a line there. So just because we're really put in a pool doesn't mean Woodcreek residents would be able to access it or at the same rate as Wimberley residents. So it's just something to keep in mind. We don't want to duplicate it, but we also can't just assume they're ours.
Do not, there are some things that we share equally. For example, the library is one, fire protection, but we pay taxes to those who get residents. We pay taxes to those entities that have the service. But when it comes to, and one of the things that I saw in the Liberty Progressive Plan that I thought was quite good is a goal that they have, that because there are so many partners in the valley that use their services, they may not reside in the city, the city limits of Cleveland. They are one of the proposals that they're making in the plan is that to expand membership of their boards and committee to non-residents. That's something that I thought was good idea. Particularly when you look at the city of Cleveland, they don't have a property tax. They're supposed to sell taxes at a very large portion of this commercial. While we are completely for the exception of the liquor store and the golf course and rivers next door to
No, we don't mention Parliament.
yeah, then we are residential. So I thought that was interesting, and working with the city of Kimberly, there's a lot of things that, they express their willingness, we express our willingness.
I had, looking at this one, I'd like to see if our participation for a participation for really Valley Trails project. Um, that multimodal transportation opportunity to connect all of the Woodbury Valley together. Address one. Also, the question, do we have a Woodcreek license to that project? We have folks that have to be raising their hands and take what I do for Woodcreek.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that. I know that our wonderful mayor is in direct communication with their mayor and commissioner regularly.
I think that, so for our focus group, the natural systems certainly play a role.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you volunteer join the group if there is already one for the Woodbury Trails.
You are not in it. No. So to piggyback on what you're saying, that is a great option, and it's supported by our survey results. Correct. And resounding, they were very clear that trails are very important and we need to, and it's like right behind us. So, yeah, that's a good point.
And I wish we could get, I know we have a good relationship with county, but
Michelle,
we need to. Okay, well, please, we have 2 weeks for the next meeting. I know, also, I think that's comments, what do you think of this session? Either second, so we can incorporate it into the document that we mail. Or you may want to send it to Sarah and or me, to the rest of the meeting, which is it also first grade. But, like I said, I thought I was encouraged by the openness in the Woodbury grant that more people will come part of this to become invested in this.
Something that would specifically be relevant to that concept, again, I don't need to just keep saying these words over and over, but is our EPA. That's the area of Woodbury that is sort of yet to be determined. And it's the area of Woodbury that will most directly impact the Wimberley Valley, what happens in it. And our work group will be the front line of setting up the plans and future regulations there. And so that I just want to kind of highlight that, make sure we understand how important that is. Because any development pouring down from the springs is going to be breaking down our necks essentially. And I know a big concern in the Wimberley Valley in general is our affordable housing. So, there might be a lot of people pointing fingers at Woodcreek and telling us to do something about it. And so, we just need to keep that in mind and understand that our vision for the future is coming from us. People sitting in this room right now are responsible for that. And we get to have a pretty big say so on what that looks like. And by we, I mean, really need y'all. I'm here to facilitate. And my
Like ETJ, I really don't understand what our these recognized documents somewhere where this group. It must have a bit of that, or rather share as well. The cost has to go together. That's the case. That's someone maybe in our next meeting. We would wait for presentation.
We can do that. We can add that to the agenda and we'll try to make sure that.
We've got some people interested. If I'm the only one.
So first off, P&Z is going to be looking at that, right? So that's on y'all's docket, I believe, of something that y'all will start seeing recommendations from council. I'll be paying attention to that, filtering that to this group. I went to I was part of a land use training session, to try to learn about this myself. I have a lot of questions. You're not alone. It is a very nuanced area of state law. And I can tell you right off the bat, one of the main things we can influence the EPA with is our plating standards. That's what we have required to get a plat for the out there. Something else we can talk about that Mr. Drummer focused on was our requirements for parkland, for any future development, and set regulations on how much space they have to dedicate to green space or conservancy. We can address, there's like 5 or 6 main things in our city code that can be influenced, and we forgot one that we already weren't here. So I think we definitely put together a document on EPJ and the fact that we should probably very relevant for many members of
Yes, yes,
yeah, the entire city organization. Add something a little bit more concrete. Maybe we can even reach out to the city attorney to ensure that we're providing the most accurate information.
I think so, because it's, the, jurisdiction of the city of the GPA. We need to understand what it is, so there, it doesn't, there are people who live on the, for example, when they have very noise disturbance, they want to control the noise ordinance. Well, sure we will, the products have very access that, but there are certain things that they are supposed to get done with some of the they are with hands and that. So that would be good. Let's do that. Hopefully we'll have some of maybe a pressure for some of us. And it also goes over the number.
and if we would be there, where's that, somewhere, I find it back.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would. It is there. I remember I was working with my daughter this morning. I showed her the map. She was 2 years old. She realized. She looked at it. She said, "Oh my God, I didn't realize." So this was good. And so it is there. It's one of those things that.
It's also going to be linked to the document that our wonderful administrative assistant will be sending out to you all here soon. The comp plan, initial planning document has a link of the map in it. It also has other comprehensive plans for your review and some other relevant information that we looked at before you. So,
And you have some of the earlier, the opening presentations, essentially, decisions. And there is a link within the city website that will give you some background of why we feel that some of the contractor at the time, some presentation. If you have some time to see the website.
okay, so we're going to move on to the comprehensive plan for schedule. You all have received this via email. We've make sure that we've done our due diligence and received this communication. We understand that certain members will not be in attendance for various meetings. We appreciate any information on that for planning purposes and just, and running tabs so we don't sit around waiting on you for 5 minutes and then realize you weren't coming. So we can kind of just brush past that. And all of these meetings will occur here at City Hall at 9 a.m. CYJ has limited availability, and so to agree to the version on that, we are going to be also give us a little bit better eye contact, especially if we start using the screen, sort of more other work groups.
I'll be very honest with you. I know it's right, but this is so much better than the integration of the table. I've done you there. I couldn't spend a lot of time like this. But that's time that I did not see. So this is much better. This is far better for a work leader. Make it even more of a work format.
Next meeting is the morning after Easter. Everybody needs to get there or.
I'll be there. I'll be here.
The 14th of June, I will go.
And I do say, we do understand it happens with every meeting council. That sometimes not understand agendas, but we can keep the schedule. And if you're unable to attend, you will still receive a package. in advance of the meeting, we will receive, you can, this is recorded, something you can do at all time. And then, of course, if you have any questions, I know that Councilman House is very accessible, so on, just let us know. We miss a meeting, let us know, and we'll be able to pay on it.
You can also send comments to me, I'll read them, the citizen comment, we can definitely input your information if you are going to be there and have the time to, if we input it. But we need to, in effort to, end this meeting here shortly, we need to move moving forward. So the conference plan focus group overview, again, this document is a review. First of all, you see it for, maybe you have not, but it outlines our natural system, physical system, physical and land use. These are our current existing focus groups. We also have our current volunteers listed. These are people who will be essentially taking the lead in areas to address how we gather citizen input, what further input we need. And that list has been updated for the last meetings. Volunteers, Mr. Hall, you have been added to this pool with Lens, assistants, and city manager Rick Lewis will also be adding, working in that focus group to give relevant city information. We have Diane in the platinum panel. The platinum panel is going to be producing a pretty extensive document for us, so Diane will just be helping us kind of gather that information and working with it. And land use, both Bill and Jerry have volunteered to help with that, so what will likely be occurring there is Lydia, myself, and Brandon will be in meeting every other hotline meeting or after, and we'll be gathering that information, and Bill and Jerry will be assisting us to, fine tune it and get it into the plan itself. And so, I don't want to stick up with we'll talk about that topic right now. Unfortunately, there are essentially existing ones operating without permit. That's all.
Well, since they're not supposed to still live with occupants. That is it. We had a bunch of
Right. Well, we have one on the books. It's just set at 0. The city could decide, the council could decide to implement a hotel occupancy tax. And I know that that would directly impact our ETJ. That is one area we could impact our ETJ. And that is definitely a topic that will need to be discussed in the plan through the focus group. And gathering this input on the topic is relevant. I also know that our wonderful city staff was requested to work on developing information for us on Airbnbs or VRBOs or whatever, short-term rentals essentially is the more appropriate name, since Airbnb and VRBO or businesses.
I can tell you there are a typical number of
This would be an area where determine very well engage with residents of back to go back to more of the have. We can.
We do have,
I mean, I would suggest we can start.
it's a great idea. I apologize. I just wanted to say, we do have one area that does have the destination to provide short-term. So that is the small cabins right across the Cypress Point, across that retention pond at the very end.
those are
Our grandfather.
I
It's in the
I think at this point there's two of them. Renting for the kids. There was one person. But not the school is so late. I don't know. But hopefully.
I think for our group, the best thing to talk about in regards to that is not what is going on. It is what's the group want for the future, right? Because talking about what is going on is a legal gray area. What we really need to understand is how could we regulate them? How do we want to regulate them moving forward? That, I think, would be the focus of
I think that it's critical for us to look at this. I know that we have to be very careful with the information of council members, that we do not have creative world. You can have to go like here, it's for us, have the world, there are some, natural systems with qualities as Justin and Jason. I would like, if at all possible, at the time, I would like for Chris Robert to be involved because he does have a lot of work, trying to get in the right in this area. So, again, maybe, and then on this note, I asked the grade, this kind of else, because I definitely can I do, I was the whole there. The project work, I don't have the reference because we provide. So I think we have to get have a point that there's concern, that there's some, they should be on the calendar. We need to advertise it, that people know the station on pay and going to find out. Or, one of the best meetings I ever had, there was a last year work group, that we were talking about road reconstruction. They would have 6 or 7 residents from Augusta, right, that wanted to go isolate, but about their construction, who is that people, and it was a pretty brief, information, some of which the rest of us had come down. So I know, I think we should meet, maybe not poster officially, but we should.
So, with that in mind, the focus group guidelines of the last aspect of our agenda today, which is sort of as unit orientation. Per request, the members of the work group like designed this set of guidelines for you to sort of help you all understand how to get started on this. So first you're going to choose whether or not you're going to be meeting in person or Zoom meeting dates. You're going to create a plan of action for your guidelines. So to do that, you might need contact information for some people. And so I know that if you contact Maureen, she would be happy to share the provided contact information for other individuals. So not everyone wants their phone number shared, so maybe they provided her an email, or perhaps they said none, and she can help us with the email. But obviously, you're going to likely need each other's contact information. And I encourage everyone to be willing to share your phone number or a phone number. Then once you've decided how you'll be meeting and you've created a plan of action, your timeline, you can share that with the city. And then you're going to decide how to gather responses and respondents. Will you be having in-person meeting with citizens? In addition to your focus group leaders, are we going to be bringing citizens in for in-person meetings? Online surveys? Will we be inviting the official communication? Highly recommend someone. Or communication assistance in the city, the more likely you are to have actual participants. You can also use social media. I know the city does not have an account, but you can always say, hey, I'm on this work group. We're looking for participants. There are meeting dates. Here's where we're meeting. We would love to have those in. Or here's an online survey of your city resident, or city Woodcreek resident. You take the survey. You also have the option to use word of mouth and engage with your personally. So you have the authority to reach out to people in the community and ask for their participants on these focus work groups to gather their information. One thing I want to caution you is to create a record. Get their comments in writing. Share that with them. Because when I say word of mouth, I don't mean to say, well, my neighbor doesn't want short-term rentals. I mean, my neighbor said they don't want short-term rentals, and here's the house where they submitted it, and they think their address is there. You still have the more information there, the more relevancy there is to it. That we know establish citizen. The goal is to have a consistent and widespread input. So again, just going back to the councilmember's government citizen comments, when he talks about the district, you have that in mind when you're gathering data. If I only gather data for my district, and I reached out into other areas of which sports is information I'm gathering in the district. For example, parks, irrelevant things to maybe say, okay, this area would be the park, this area is the water. Review comprehensive plan survey. So this was a great suggestion. You mentioned that we really need to look at our survey and use the data that we already gathered. So take the time to get into the survey, take look through the public open comments that are relevant to your focus group, compile that information, identify areas of the survey that are lacking, maybe questions you still have that were not addressed in the survey, and use those to create more focused. What more do we need? The goals for the questions that find out based on the trends that you've already found in the survey. The next component would be to actually gather citizen input via surveys to try and focus. So you're going to present citizens your discoveries from the confidence survey analysis. You're going to present your guiding questions. You're going to collect data from them and synthesize it. You're going to compile these findings into a document that can be shared. The goal here is to develop a narrative on your focus topics and subtopics. Then you can present that back to the market and we can use that to write this document. The last thing you need to keep in mind with these focus groups is that we are working to address current conditions and future vision. I'll say that again. Current conditions and the future vision. We need to make sure we're hitting on both of those. So we want to begin drafting portions of our comprehensive plan. I'm not asking y'all to do that, but I am asking you to provide me with actual information that I can. Right? We're just rattling off a bunch of verbal information. I'll take notes as best I can. The more like in-depth packet you can give me, the better this document. What we want to do is address what are the conditions for focus group topic, establish what the vision, identify what objectives should the city establish in order to accomplish citizen goals. And I want to say that again. Our goal as a work group is to tell the citizens what they want. It's to figure out what our citizens want and to create a plan for accomplishing that. That doesn't mean we have the money in the bank now. That means that our city starts to work to have the money in the bank, or to apply for grants, or to seek federal funds that are available currently right now through a bunch of different programs. Again, this is a draft that you guys can make. It can be written paragraphs. It can be just a question of bullet points. It can be a pile of data. You can. I don't care what it is, but I would appreciate it if something concrete. And not just like a voicemail on my phone, you know what I mean? So, and again, we need to be able to submit actual data to the city to back things that we're saying. More documentation. So definitely get people names, get people addresses. We're not going to be putting that on blast to the public. You know, we can request it, but the reason we want that information is because we want to know these are our citizens, and we want to be able to tie that to direct citizens. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. This is kind of.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Well, and then also, you know, we have to need to start. So, but you are, you and I are just right. So I think we should believe that the dance and what we put the rules of the plan.
And Maureen, you have precedent.
yeah.
So we sorry.
We have approximately over 50% of the residents are here.
No, about 900, right? So that, so we have email system set up. There's 500 people.
I got to take that. So that's pretty good. That's
But if you do have a start,
yes. So now all I have to say is survey monkey, and I can create whatever be one individual format. We will share it digitally, share it via communication. If you were one of each district, paper that would really fall on your walking the bus. Right? It is because every citizen has had the opportunity to sign up. They've designated whether or not they want. We have social media next door. In fact, reaches a larger portion of our residents getting 1,500 people are part of it. The thing is, we're just gathering information. There's no way to represent every single citizen in the city. And we're going to do the best. We've already sent out the comment survey, and it will need to be updated. Usually, I think your comment is every 5 to 10 years. So there will be other comments. But we're just
But we will send you a blast. There's a certain amount of those questions. We'll find them how to do it. And we'll, of course, do social media, send the possible, you know. And we have text for it. We have a text list. We have text. We can do those. I mean, it's an offer to first survey up here, filled out and up here. There's definitely something you can do. I don't think we have the resources right now to employ all out, you know, like full survey and our group practice right now. Once Brandon gives us the feedback, once the focus groups start getting going, we might say, yeah, I survey. And that's something we decided to from the city about. We do have one certified for it, but I don't want to encourage to go that route unless we decided, because we don't want to, you know, it might be like everyone who works for this week, like, okay, it would be best if this was all one day. You know, that's for sure. Okay, so wait.
Very, we're talking this.
Yeah. Which portion? All of it?
All of it. I think every that we file it.
I see. So you want to, so my one caution is, and this comes from my teaching here, is that I'm going to accidentally delete everything. So,
We'll send everybody.
that's great. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm trying to pop on.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys got, yeah, you guys got to work out. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, right.
I know now I'm in trouble with it, but one thing that we do get I thought that my thought is when you send the document, I think get the document itself to identify, make changes, you will do your stuff in this case, your version with your thing, so that it's easier to. Okay,
right now we have meetings scheduled after June 14th. In our original focus group plan, I asked that our focus group at the first week before April 19th. So even if that's just because the other meeting, I'll share with you contact information to get it started. I would ask that you all attend the meeting. We said 2 to 3 times before June 14th. And so, or maybe so with that in mind, I would suggest that you already know we're going to be available like week that you plan to meet 30 minutes before or after pre-existing things.
I know that I already stuff.
Okay, so the platform panel is also part of that. So I think that's well, the platform panel will likely be addressing that entire Yep. And thank you. If there are further discussion, we can adjourn the meeting at